Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I'm trying to find out a little bit more on your behalf about the far-right crossover into something called the Incel movement, which in simplistic terms is men who can't get girlfriends. So much of the evil in the world is undertaken by men who can't get girlfriends. Do you know, I sat here 10 years ago saying the way to deal with Anjem Choudhury and people like that was to point at them and laugh at them. I said, if you treat them like really scary, important people, they will become important people in the minds of their even more cretinous and inadequate followers. Same thing now is happening with weird white supremacist, anti-women, misogynist movements, and they're already causing terrorism. But of course, most of the people doing it are white, so it doesn't get quite the same coverage in much of the British and American media that it would if they were brown. I refer to Alec Minassian, the 25-year-old charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of attempted murder at a court in the city. He is a so-called he defines as, or he's described himself as, a so-called incel, which stands for involuntarily celibate. In other words, pardon my French, men who can't get a girlfriend. I nearly said laid. That's why I said pardon my French, but I'm glad that I didn't. That would have been a little bit disrespectful. He's also praised a man called Elliot Rodger, a 22-year-old who killed 6 in a rampage through Isla Vista in California in 2014. He explained in a video that emerged after he turned his gun on himself that he wanted to punish women for rejecting him. So that's the thing. And it's terrorism, and it's already caused deaths well into double figures. But, you know, I don't suppose that British traitors will be queuing up on Fox News to say that this is evidence terrorism is working. I don't know if you've noticed this, because you can't get Fox News in Britain anymore. If there's ever an Islamist attack on these shores, there's a 2 or 3 people in this country who turn up on right-wing American news shows to say that we are terrorised, that terrorism is working. They get excited at the thought of it. And you could see it online with the Toronto attack. The usual people desperately excited about it because it just gives more fuel to the flames of their hatred. And then it turns out actually to be someone on their side of the political divide, and it all goes silent. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you're a terrorist, you're disgusting, whatever your colour, whatever your cause. If you're a paedophile, you're disgusting, whatever your colour, whatever your claims. The crime does not become better or worse according to the colour of the culprit. It's really not difficult, but I'm hoping that it still causes a degree of confusion to have it pointed out so clearly, because otherwise there's a whole chapter of my forthcoming book that I'm going to have to scrap. 23 minutes, well, I'm going to have to write it first, actually, before I can scrap it. 23 minutes after 11 is the time. I want to find out more about involuntary celibacy. Don't say, well, get married then, James, because that would be a really weak Les Dawson-style joke. But men who can't get girlfriends, that is historians of the future. When they look back on Islamist extremism, when they look back on far-right resurgences, you can tell by looking at these men. And that's why they worship adulterers. That's why they worship really nasty men who cheat on their wives and boast about being sexual offenders. It's why they like Donald Trump and other kind of far-right adulterers, because these men are just as messed up and nasty, but somehow they've developed the ability to speak to women. It's a great line in an account of the Daily Mail's recent travails, which describes an awful lot of their editorial as hatred of men who know how to speak to girls. Quite bizarre when you've never really seen that as a problem, to understand the levels of hatred and anger that can swell up inside men who've never really managed to, leading in this case to a terrorist attack. 24 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We're going to move along now to something completely different and something really very harrowing, but again, it's fallen. I've finally come to a slightly better understanding of it. You remember when the tragic case of Charlie Gard was unfolding, and it led. I suspect that I don't even know anymore with percentages. You used to have roughly 10 to 15% of the population who, either through prejudice or ignorance or an absence of interaction, were horrible. You know, they hated everybody. In the last few years, it's become very hard to track that. It used to be easy to track because they'd vote for certain parties in elections and you'd see, oh, look, there you go. Now I don't know. How many people listening to me now found the incidents of doctors and nurses at Great Ormond Street being sent abuse and death threats by members of the public almost impossible to understand? I still struggle to understand it, but I'm getting better as I look at the Alfie Evans case, which is in many ways similar. And a lot of it is about personnel. You look at the people who are turning up at hospital gates with film crews, people who've got, absolutely no stake or medical knowledge whatsoever, but are somehow leading assaults upon British doctors and nurses. And in the case of Alfie Evans, they turn out to be Americans quite often, from an organisation called Christian Concern, which a judge has taken aim at in the latest horrible development in this story. And when you look at, if you go back even further, this is actually about using the plight of children like Alfie Evans and Charlie Gard to persuade American people that a national health service free at the point of care is somehow a bad thing. And it was a real penny drop moment for me yesterday when I worked this out. I saw someone explaining it on Twitter and dug in a bit deeper. Because this is the whole point. Not only does this dirty money have designs upon our NHS, dirty money that was probably employed or spent during the Brexit campaign. I'm pretty sure. Didn't somebody thank Robert Mercer for their support, or thank Breitbart for their support during Brexit? I'm pretty sure they did. And that money, of course, has designs on the NHS, but it also resists furiously any attempts in America to go even further than Obamacare and actually have something like the NHS. That's why they call it a socialist. I call it socialised, free at the point of care, equal access for everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a millionaire or a pauper. If you're poorly, you go to the same hospital and get the same treatment. I know that, private health insurance changes that picture slightly, but the fundamental truth is the same. And how many times have I said to you, if you want to know why something is happening, ask yourself what an amoral billionaire would do. So an amoral billionaire looks at the NHS and says to himself, well, I could get the worst kind of cancer going and I could pay for the best treatment available in the world and the cost wouldn't even touch the sides of my bank account. Why the hell should my taxes be going to pay for that poor person over there when they get cancer? And weirdly, what the Alfie Evans case does is use choice to undermine equality. It says this family should be free to choose what they want, regardless of whether there's any medical evidence for that choice. They should have freedom of choice. And under a nationalised or socialised health service, they don't have it. Which is why some very, very odd characters ally themselves with these poor and desperate parents at their time of torture. But I'm more interested in your evaluation of the kind of people that turn up at the doors of Alder Hey Hospital in Liverpool in this case and threaten to storm the place. What do you think is motivating them? And if you are one of them, we're probably going to have a heated exchange, but we can keep it sweet. When did we become a country where self-publicists, spivs and charlatans can whip up public hatred against doctors and nurses? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's coming out to 11:30. PMQ's on the way with Theo at 12:45. He'll be watching it from noon so that you don't have to. Of all the stories in the last couple of years that have left me as dismayed as I am baffled, it would be scumbags riding on the misery of Charlie Gard's family in the hope of getting their ugly little faces on the telly. And now very similar things happening with regard to Alfie Evans up in Liverpool. But the culmination is when a crowd of British public threaten to storm a British hospital. Explain to me how that's happened, because I'm close to understanding it, but I've still got a way to go. It's 11:30. It's a horrible, horrible story, and I'm interested not in the rights and wrongs of it, because I understand the desperation of a parent to believe anything other than the inevitable, imminent death of their baby. But the people that arrive at the hospital gates, the ambulance chasers, the self-publicists condemned yesterday by a judge for giving false hope to the parents of Alfie Evans, this little boy in Liverpool, whose doctors, the doctors that have cared for him for his entire life, have arrived at one conclusion, and that conclusion is being challenged by a self-described law student, some pro-life campaigners from a group called Christian Concern. They are, needless to say, both anti-choice for pregnant women who want to terminate their pregnancies and have some pretty ripe views on homosexuality as well. There's no suggestion that the parents of Alfie Evans share those views, but any port in a storm is probably their thinking. I now see an escalation of what we saw during Charlie Gard's tragedy, which was doctors at Great Ormond Street, the finest children's hospital in the world, receiving death threats and abuse from people who that's where I don't have the words anymore. People who had been persuaded that the doctors and nurses looking after Charlie Gard didn't have his best interests at heart. Who did the persuading and why? That's my question to you. Because at Alder Hey, you saw a small mob of people threatening to storm the hospital. This was after a self-described law student called Stroilov. Let me get you his Christian name. Pavel Stroilov. He told Alfie's dad that he would be within the law if he stormed into Alder Hey Hospital and removed his son. That's not true. The Court of Appeal noted this is completely false. So who are these people persuading members of the public to turn on our doctors and nurses, and why are they doing it? 0345 6060 973. That's what I want. Why are they doing it? Why would anyone turn up at Great Ormond Street to claim better understanding of Charlie Gard's case than the doctors have? Why would people be at Alder Hey whipping up a small crowd to storm the... What's in it for them? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Or set me straight and tell me why actually you don't think you are a mad loony, but you are somehow on the side of the people who think they know better than the doctors that have been looking after Alfie Evans all his life. I do have a slight tendency, I completely accept and admit from the start. Is it white coat syndrome where you trust doctors too much? I kind of have a slight tendency to do that. Doctors disagree, medicine changes, science advances. Read your Thomas Kuhn, Paradigm Shifts in Science. It's all about the best available explanation for the currently available evidence, and it changes. Even the theory of relativity gets superseded, gets overtaken by better explanations of the phenomena. But if my car breaks down, I go to a mechanic. If I've got toothache, I go to a dentist. And if I'm poorly, I go to a doctor. I appreciate an awful lot of Brexit. Britain rejects expertise, but this level of rejection of expertise seems to me to be really, really strange. Steve's in Nottingham. Steve, what's going on?
Well, hi, James. Nice to talk to you again. I just wanted to tie it in, really, with the social media theme that you've been talking about earlier in the week, because I tend to listen in the morning. But I think we live in a world now where people can almost hear whatever they want to hear. They can tailor their feed that comes to them. And if you want to believe something, you can seek information or deliberately avoid information to the contrary to support whatever you're thinking. And I think it's just like a kind of whirlwind effect with this stuff. You know, you may remember a few years ago there was posts flying around social media. Would you let somebody inject arsenic into your child? Do you remember the sort of anti-vaccination?
Vaguely, although I don't I follow the accounts that would see that peppering my feed unduly. But this is the anti-vaccine stuff.
Yeah, and suddenly somebody with this tiny bit of knowledge that's really quite unfounded.
It's not knowledge, is it? Really?
No, not at all. But it's allowed to gather momentum.
But what's in it for them? What's in it? Because I think you're right, and I think I'd go further. I think that somehow the fact that you can say stuff on social media and not get laughed out of town in the way that you would if you said it in public has kind of polluted almost every area of public discourse. This notion that somehow it becomes valid because it's out there it started with the below the line comments on newspaper articles, didn't it? When people could write stuff there that their own partners and children would have told them to shut up about, but they can write it there and get 48 likes on the Daily Mail, and suddenly they don't think they're racist anymore. They think they're speaking common sense. But what's in it for them? Because there are people here. There are people turn up at the gates of Great Ormond Street. People are agitating on behalf of Alfie Evans' parents. I don't mean the punters on social media spreading nonsense. The people starting it. What's in it for them? What do they get out of this?
Do you know something? I think we're now where people have a desperation to believe and belong to something.
And to reject the received wisdom, isn't it? The rejection of a status quo.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. And if the doctor says the doctor must be wrong, everything can be challenged by every man or every woman and their dog. You understand what, like if a teacher says something to a child, everybody can challenge that, can't they? Oh no, they shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't have done this. And there's got to be a recognised form of expertise, but we want to challenge absolutely everything at every level.
Let's go further. Let's speculate a little further, because now I want to do the why. Why do these people want to challenge? Is it because they have to believe that the system is somehow skewed against them, and that's why they haven't done very well in life?
I'm sure they do, yeah. Or not just about skewed against them, but perhaps they could do better, or perhaps they just feel that they're unrecognised, or, their own level of expertise is not recognised by other people, or whatever it is. But it's the notion of the old style. Do you remember the old barstool preachers that you used to get in pubs years ago?
Yes.
But that forum, that environment has largely disappeared now, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And also pub bores would be generally ignored or tolerated. They wouldn't get, 178 thumbs ups on the Daily Mail comments section.
No, of course, and which now, like you say, is giving them that sort of level of authenticity.
Validation. So you see a link, because I sometimes worry I see too many links. I feel like the kid in The Sixth Sense. I think they are all linked. I think climate change, vaccines, Brexit, this notion that something that's demonstrably untrue gets the same coverage and balance as something that's not necessarily beyond reproach, but is the current best available explanation. It's the current truth. It's the expertise, and we give them equal balance.
Of course, and don't forget the speed at which the information travels is rapid now.
Yeah.
It's unprecedented, isn't it? Whereas before there was a certain process, it had to be, checked and edited or whatever, before it went publicised.
So you're pro-life people who are piggybacking poor Alfie Evans' tragic case, or you're sort of spivs and charlatans who exploited Charlie Gard's tragic situation. The problem that society has created is somehow affording them a validity and a weight that other people fall for a whole host of reasons.
I'm sure it is, but I'm also sure, I think there's a certain element of people who they look for something to believe in. Years ago, the church probably provided that, didn't it? Or,
but why do you want to believe bad stuff? Why do you want to believe that doctors and nurses are doing harm to a baby? That's such an odd sort of maypole to dance around, isn't it?
It is to you and I, who are thinking logically about stuff, but a lot of people, they want to believe bad things, morbid things. That every film in every cinema is about some kind of tragedy or death or whatever, isn't it?
Yes.
And people want death cells to coin. You may remember the film Spinal Tap. You remember when they explained the Black Album cover?
Yes.
And he said, death cells. People want to believe in this.
So it is, it's a commoditisation of misery and tragedy, and I guess
I'm sure it is.
There's no surprise that there are people prepared to do that, prepared to profit from it, either in terms of attention or in terms of something more material. So what you have is this group called the CLC, which is part of Christian Concern, which is a fundamentalist Christian group that stoked controversy over its hardline views on abortion and homosexuality. Alfie's parents appointed them 2 weeks ago to help, and they've been going to town since with regard to profile and publicity. The group's legal counsel said an unnamed friend had become aware of the case, suggested that Alfie's parents approach the CLC. I would love to know who that unnamed friend was, because some distinctly unsavoury characters started popping up at Great Ormond Street during Charlie Gard's tragedy, didn't they? Who's the unnamed friend that put these poor people in touch with these characters, and why? Stefan is I'll squeeze you in, Stefan. Stefan's in Gravesend. What do you think, Stefan?
Hi there, James. First time caller.
You're very welcome.
Kind.
Of course I will.
So I just think really it all goes back to Michael Gove, who I think summed it up best, which was the British people have had enough of experts, haven't they?
I think he contends that was taken slightly out of context, but it certainly appealed to people who think that their, fag packet understanding of complicated economic theories is worth as much as the governor of the Bank of England.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the case with the people who are protesting outside the hospital in Liverpool, is essentially they believe that their belief in the sanctity of life, that this child should be kept alive no matter what, despite the fact that he will have zero quality of life, that their belief in that is as good as the whole of the medical team who are taking care of this poor little boy.
And that is simply false equivalence.
Yes, it is, because unfortunately, people's thoughts and feelings are not equal to fact, evidence, and
science,
medical knowledge. Exactly.
Well, I get it with other areas. I can see why, and it's all about usually dark money. Why would anyone spend millions of pounds trying to persuade the public that climate change isn't real? Answer: because they're making a shed load of cash out of fossil fuels, and if we stop using fossil fuels, they'll stop making a shed load of cash. Why would anyone spend a shed load of money trying to exploit families like Alfie Evans? Answer: because they don't want American people, and a lot of these characters hail from America, to ever appreciate socialised healthcare, and the more damage you can do to the NHS, the quicker the privatisation will occur. The vaccine stuff, didn't Stephen Wakefield have a stake in an alternative to the MMR that would presumably have made him a lot of money? Follow the money and you'll usually get the answers. But I don't quite get how an ordinary Liverpudlian housewife could be persuaded to come down to Alder Hey and contemplate storming a hospital. Do you see what I mean? There's a leap here that I don't quite get.
I do see what you mean. It's very difficult. I think it's probably something to do with the fact that people, especially in this case, it's such an emotive issue. It's parents who just want their child to live. People are just looking for any opportunity in this emotive.
And then the Pope gets involved, which, as a good Catholic, I should ordinarily be tugging my forelock, doffing my cap and assuming the knee. But what the hell's he got to do with the Pope?
Well, I was raised Catholic as well, and I think it has precisely nothing to do with the Pope. This is
10 Hail Marys for you.
Judicial issue.
10 Hail Marys for you at your next confession, Stefan.
In nomine Patris.
It's 11:47, Dominus Vobiscum. I kind of should be pleased about this proposal to limit the so-called buy one get one free offers in supermarkets as a way of tackling obesity, but it seems to me that they're going after the wrong people. It's not the consumers who need help avoiding this stuff. It's the people punting it who need a little bit of deterrence from punting it so voraciously. You need to hit them in the pocket. And if you want proof of what I'm saying, look at what happened to the bookmakers' share price yesterday when it was reported in one newspaper that the Chancellor is going to reduce the maximum stake on a fixed odds betting terminal from £100 to £2. Very interesting things. Trying to get inside the mind of not so much the parents, because I think if your baby is poorly, you seek a second opinion, possibly even a third. And the temptation is to keep seeking opinions until you find one you like, even if it's at odds with the other 100 that you've heard. And that seems to be a description of the parents of Alfie Evans. It's the people getting involved, sticking their oar in. What do they get out of it? Publicity? Profile? Something more sinister? I don't know. I'm just asking. 11:51 is the time. Chris is in Abbots Langley. Chris, what would you like to say?
Abbots Langley, hi. Yeah.
Hello,
hi,
mate.
James. Thanks for taking my phone call. I was listening to your conversation. I'm a parent who's got a child who suffered with a very rare kidney condition. We were at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and we were advised after treatments and operations that there's nothing the doctors could do to save the kidney, to maintain sort of normal level of lifestyle, and they would need to withdraw treatment and all the rest of it, and kind of wait for the kidneys to fail and go back through dialysis and all the rest of it. As parents, we weren't prepared to accept that. We just felt that there's more that needed to be done. My wife is very proactive in this, did lots of research on LinkedIn, found a doctor, a consultant at the Children's Evelina Hospital across the river, had a conversation with her, and she agreed to get some very new experimental machinery across from Europe to help our daughter on the disease.
And this is, I mean, I'm presuming from your tone that it had a happy ending, this experimental treatment. But it is, I mean, what you did was seek a second opinion within the structures of the NHS.
Yes, essentially that is it. I mean, one thing that I've learned from all of this, speaking with the experts, is that all they can give you is an opinion.
Yes.
There's always that element of the unknown, isn't there? You know, you don't know what you don't know.
And in many ways, it would be odd not to seek a second opinion. Doctors often encourage you to do so. I mean, they want you to seek second opinions. But it's when you, and I'm delighted, I mean, tell me a little more about your little girl, actually, because we could do with cheering up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, she had a kidney transplant. I donated my kidney to her. She continued the course of treatment at the Evelina to get this disease that was attacking her kidneys under control. And she's gone into remission with it. She's doing well. She's doing really well. Couldn't be happy if there were two of us.
And have you spoken to the doctor at Great Ormond Street since? Have you been back in touch with them to say, look, what happened?
It's kind of tricky. I don't want to go rubbing it in his face. You know what I mean? The man's well,
no, but he'd probably want to know as a doctor, wouldn't he?
Do you know, we do keep in touch, and we let him know what's going on. And I hope that he learns his lessons from watching and hearing what's happened.
Beth tells me you were on the telly last night. I didn't realise this when she put you through. What was that about?
Yeah, we were on the television last night. Davina McCall's this time next year. So,
blimey!
Yeah, so that was really it was hard watching it all back.
I'm sure.
And it just kind of just cements a lot of things in your head. It's kind of therapeutic as well.
I can imagine.
Don't have the opportunity.
No, but this is you are in many ways the holy grail then on this issue, because. Well, we've said throughout, science is constantly evolving. That's where I always somewhat pretentiously cite Thomas Kuhn's theory of paradigm changes. There is no complete answer to a scientific question because the evidence might change. It's like what they're doing in the Hadron Collider. Stuff you can't see will change our understanding of the universe. But if you had gone to 17, 18, 19, 20 doctors, and in your desperation you could have done until finally one of them told you what you wanted to hear, that's very different from what you did. And if then, after you'd found on option 27, somebody prepared to tell you what you wanted to hear, suddenly a small crowd of people gathered at the hospital where your girl was being treated and threatened to march in and take her away. That's the bit I don't understand. Do you have a better insight into that than me?
Do you know what we had emails, unsolicited emails coming in saying I can help.
Yeah.
You know, it's a case of you need to give her these different mixes of medicines and herbs.
Yeah.
And it was a case of like I can really help, and we're sitting there going, you know, I'd love to believe you could, but I think as a reasonable human being, you have to take a step back. I think it is people trying to self-perpetuate, trying to build up their own public persona. It's all about money, like you say. It all boils down to follow the pounds, and you get to where you need to be. And you just got to look at it, think about it, take a step back, take some time to digest it, and go with what. Do your own research. Do what you need to do to try and get.
Especially the conditions that are on the fringes of understanding. Nobody really knows what's wrong with Alfie Evans, as far as I can tell. And you know, in our lifetime, kidney transplants have come into existence. They didn't even exist before. So this is an ongoing process. It's you see, I don't know. The exploitation of the parents is clearly happening, but you can't blame the parents. And I don't know what the alternative would be. You can't stop people emailing you. You can't, and equally, I couldn't stop you from falling for one of these snake oil merchants. Do you see what I mean? It's just something to do with the way that the coverage unfolds, and there is something in that false equivalence line which doesn't apply to your story because you were going from one medical expert to another, and they disagreed with each other.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the reason why we kind of agreed to go on the television, and we were sort of asked along by the producers.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Kitty, and I said, look, I think it'd be really good if we could do this for other people, just to sort of build understanding, build awareness of these sorts of kidney conditions that kids are going through, or adults as well have it as well. John Alomi famously parted
John Alomi,
well,
yes, of course.
with the same thing.
Yes.
And Kitty said, you know what, I think it'd be great. Regardless of what the outcome was, we didn't know where we'd be this time next year, whether we'd be in an okay place or a bad place, but she wanted to do it to share the story to
yeah, no, I completely get that. I completely get that. And
I guess that's what kind of. Sorry, I guess that's kind of what these people, or at least parents, I would hope are trying to do, is just build awareness of it. Is to say it's a way of reaching out. You're at that place where you're really desperate. You're reaching out. You need to hear someone and say, we can do this. We can make it all better.
And it depends, of course, the moral value of that exchange depends upon the qualifications of the person saying that they can make it better. And thank God for you and for Kitty. The person you were speaking to was just as qualified as the person who'd encouraged you to go down a different path. And that is the scary thing, because that's quite hard to police as well, isn't it? You know, there's also the case of Ashia King, whose parents did spirit him away in contravention of the law. And he's, you know, recovered, but of course there's no way of knowing whether he would have recovered if he'd stayed in Birmingham and been treated by the doctors who'd been looking after him. Chris's case is right on the money. I don't know if you don't have to Sky Plus stuff these days, can you? You can watch it back on the catch-up services. I look forward to seeing that. It's just coming up to... Chris, are you still there, mate? Thanks ever so much for the call.
Mate, yeah.
That was really helpful. I really appreciate that call, and I'm really glad that you had a happy ending. Is it worth me watching it back on catch-up?
If you want to, you can.
Yeah. Put a face to the name. It's coming up to 11:59. This is quite a nice observation from a Twitter account called Sweet Smokescreen. They get to be irate, James. Some people thrive on anger and perceived victimhood. Just look at the Westboro Baptist Church and their pathetic protests against societal issues like LGBT. It has zero effect on them personally. This is true, isn't it? These are the people who... protest soldiers coming back dead from war in America with placards saying this is God's punishment for gays. This is God's punishment for homosexuality. They seem to me to actually be as mad as people who would turn up at a hospital claiming to have special insights into the medical condition of a dying baby. The anger that they get to express, is that what's in it for them? Some sort of emotional release? Some exercise in inventing of spleen? I don't know. I continue to ask. And then we will turn our attention to whether or not supermarkets are going after the wrong people when they go after the customers who eat bad food.